Thousands of people are being relocated to the UK after personal data was leaked of Afghans who supported British forces. We're expecting to hear from the Defence Secretary at 12:30. First, let's bring in our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes. Deborah, breaking story this hour. What more can you tell us?
Yes, so I'm actually outside the High Courts here in London, where a super injunction has been lifted on the reporting about this data breach by the Ministry of Defence. And like you say, the Defence Secretary is going to be speaking to Parliament this afternoon, in a few minutes, in fact. The breach itself is understood to have happened about 3 years ago, and yet it has been unable to be reported for all that time. A number of media organisations, including The Times, has been involved in trying to battle against this extraordinary secrecy by the government to prevent the reporting of what's happened. You'll know in the past there have been data breaches involving Afghans that have been trying to apply for a government scheme to move to the UK or receive support. These are Afghan nationals who either directly worked for the British military in Afghanistan or indirectly were involved. For example, there are Afghan special forces that were trained by the British military. They worked for the Afghan government at the time, but obviously since the collapse of that Western-backed government back in 2021 and the return of the Taliban to power, their lives have been put at risk, and the government has been under huge pressure to relocate them. They had a scheme that was designed to provide assistance or to relocate the Afghan nationals that were deemed legitimate to qualify for this relocation. And my understanding is that there was a long list of more than 20,000 names of Afghan nationals that had been applying for this relocation scheme, and this list was unfortunately on an email sent out, and the Ministry of Defence effectively lost control of who had access to that email. Now, I've not been intimately involved in the last few years of battling against the super injunction, but there are reporting now that talks about the implications of that. There is a law firm, Barings Law, which is representing, it says it is representing around 1,000 individuals who have been impacted by this leak of information, and they are pursuing legal avenues. I've been told by one source that the cost of all of this has been estimated for the government to be up to £7 billion. Now, it seems unlikely that figure will be the ultimate figure that comes out, but clearly the government is going to be responsible for not only the mishandling of this information, but also dealing with the potential harm. The law firm Barings Law has said that there is a serious risk of violence to those whose names are on this list that was mishandled, it would seem. And so this is clearly, it's a long-running crisis that not just this government but previous governments have been aware of and have clearly been trying to keep out of the public domain. Presumably they would argue for sound security reasons, but clearly that it would seem that those reasons have fallen away, and the public interest of knowing about this security breach has been deemed to be the most important thing. So we will be hearing from the Defence Secretary in a few minutes, and I'm sure he will give more details about this. It's clearly not just hugely concerning for all of those Afghan nationals whose names were on the leaked email, the list on that leaked email, but clearly as well for the government, its funding, the taxpayers' money, which clearly are now going to have to be involved in compensating for the blunder and potentially the relocation of even more Afghan nationals. Obviously, you're hearing there have been many that have been relocated already as a result of this.
Deborah, I'm interested in the impacts of this, particularly on the individuals involved. The Taliban back in power following the fall of the Western-backed government, then the leak of this data that's in the public realm to some degree, certainly for a year before it's really acted on by the British government. Are we aware of any victims of violence or potentially even worse against these 20 or so thousand named individuals in Afghanistan? And then also the other thing that strikes me is the challenges that these people may have in leaving the country to be able to access ways of getting to safety, getting to the UK through this scheme.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and these are going to be clearly questions that you can imagine the Defence Secretary will face as well. A source that I've spoken to who has been involved in these proceedings says that it is thought that a small number of individuals known to have been on the list have been killed. It's not clear if that was as a direct result of their names being on this list. It's also not clear who actually has access to the information. Clearly, the UK government, once it became aware that this breach has occurred, has been working to try to contain the damage. But once the control of the information has been lost, then clearly there are implications for individuals that is out of the control of the UK government. But I understand that everybody on that list has now been informed that their data has been breached. But given that this leak happened 3 years ago, it's taken a long time for that admission to be made to them. And so you can imagine that this is only the beginning, really, of a very long and difficult and dangerous, potentially, process.